Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing a forensic deep dive into something truly fascinating. We're going to look at how a 2,500-year-old architectural vision is quite literally being weaponized in modern internet warfare. What we're really digging into here are the mechanics of intellectual dishonesty. We'll see exactly how incredibly complex ancient texts get twisted and manipulated today just to secure a victory at all costs. So let's break down exactly how this architecture of deception is built.
Okay, to really understand this, we need to travel all the way back to ancient Babylon. Picture this. You're an exiled priest named Ezekiel, sitting by a river, totally cut off from a completely ruined Jerusalem. And suddenly, you have this surreal, highly technical vision of a massive new temple. I mean, it's a meticulous architectural schematic. It's basically an ancient contractor's blueprint. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a beautiful message of hope, right? But it actually created a massive theological crisis. And this completely illustrates the glaring problem, because nested right inside Ezekiel's hyper-specific building blueprints are ritual laws that blatantly contradict the foundational bedrock of Moses' Torah. Just look at the math. For the Sabbath, Moses required 2 lambs. Ezekiel, he demands 6 lambs, plus a ram. For Passover, Moses required 0 sin offerings, but Ezekiel suddenly mandates an entire bull. And for the Feast of Matzah, the daily requirement jumps from 2 bowls all the way up to 7. The numbers just simply do not add up. So the crucial takeaway here is that Ezekiel inflates the Sabbath sacrifice requirement by a staggering 300%. And this isn't just some minor rounding error. It created such a colossal accounting problem that ancient rabbis literally held closed-door meetings to debate whether they should completely ban the book of Ezekiel from the biblical canon just to save their foundation. Now, you might be wondering, why in the world do we care about an ancient contractor's typo today? I mean, let the guy have a math error in his blueprint, right? Well, in scriptural traditions, these meticulous little details are the load-bearing walls of the entire theological structure. The whole premise relies on these texts being divinely ordained and perfectly preserved. So when you find glaring discrepancies in this math, it isn't just some piece of ancient trivia. For a modern apologist who's out there looking to totally dismantle a rival religion on the internet, that 2,500-year-old crack in the foundation becomes their absolute primary weapon. It is exactly the ammunition they've been hunting for. Let's move over to our second source and see how this builds. We analyzed a transcript of a modern Islamic apologetics video that sets a highly calculated rhetorical trap. And it relies on a concept called abrogation. Simply put, this is the idea that an older divine law can be entirely invalidated and completely replaced by a newer, perfect revelation. This speaker in this video uses Ezekiel's tricky math problem to force his audience into a very specific, stark, lose-lose scenario. He basically says, look, either the ancient text of the Torah is a corrupted, failed forgery because it doesn't match Ezekiel, or if Ezekiel was allowed to change the rules, well then your eternal law isn't actually eternal. And if it's not eternal, the law is abrogated, paving the way for it to be completely replaced by Islam. It's a rhetorically brilliant trap. He then turns that exact same text around to attack Christianity, effectively knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. First, he points out that the Apostle Paul said physical circumcision profits nothing, but Ezekiel strictly demands it. Then, even more aggressively, he highlights how Christian dogma completely relies on Jesus being a flawless, sinless high priest. Yet Ezekiel's messianic prince is explicitly ordered to offer a bull as a sacrifice for his own sins. Now, at first glance, this looks like a completely devastating argument. But we have to ask, is this corporate lawyer tactic actually intellectually honest? Or are we just watching the deliberate manipulation of information strictly to win a debate? Our sources make it very clear that we aren't here to judge which theology is right. We are strictly evaluating the intellectual honesty of the argument itself. And according to our source report, what we're actually witnessing here is profound intellectual dishonesty. It is the deliberate, conscious deployment of deceptive reasoning to secure a victory at all costs. Our forensic report dissects the apologist's tactics, starting with a classic logical fallacy, the false dilemma. He artificially forces his viewers into a predetermined conclusion by basically declaring the text is either corrupted or the law is abrogated. Pick one. He presents these as the absolute only 2 possibilities in the entire universe. But as the report reveals, he's actively suppressing the third option, what's known in formal logic as the tertium quid. You see, for centuries, brilliant rabbinic scholars didn't view Ezekiel's rules as a textual corruption or a total abrogation. Instead, they viewed them as the law of the messianic age. Think of it kind of like a localist software update designed for a very specific future epoch.
one that just runs alongside the original Mosaic operating system. The apologist absolutely knows the scholarship exists, but he actively hides it from his audience so his trap actually works. Notice how he handles the opposing side when he actually does acknowledge them? He relies on a classic straw man fallacy. When Christian scholars offer really complex, metaphorical interpretations of Ezekiel's temple, like seeing it as a symbolic representation of the church, he doesn't engage with the substance at all. He just brushes the whole thing off as desperate cope. And he does the exact same thing to highly revered Jewish scholars, like the medieval commentator Rabbi Rashi. Rashi argued that Ezekiel's use of the word Sabbath might actually just be a general linguistic term for a holiday, rather than literally meaning Saturday. But the apologist deploys a total rhetorical smoke bomb, a terministic screen, to avoid engaging with that linguistic analysis altogether. By dismissing Rashi's incredibly complex philological scholarship as some weird ad hoc fabrication, he's just emotionally manipulating the audience. He intentionally uses these highly pejorative, insulting adjectives to make his viewers feel like the historical scholarship isn't even worth glancing at. It essentially puts a screen between the audience and the actual truth. But perhaps the most glaring tactic identified in the forensic report is what it calls a motivated double standard. Honestly, the report highlights this as the absolute hallmark of intellectual dishonesty. Just look at how hypocritical this mechanism is. You literally cannot have it both ways. On side A, the apologist demands strict literalism, using the exact, precise math of Ezekiel as an infallible witness to bankrupt his rival's laws. But then, on side B, in the very next breath, he declares the entire biblical text is a failed, completely corrupted historical falsification. Well, if the canon is entirely corrupted, then Ezekiel's authority to invalidate Moses completely vanishes. He only applies strict scrutiny when it serves his goal and drops it instantly when it doesn't. The apologist claims this messy, contradictory math proves a massive institutional cover-up. But as our sources point out, the actual historical reality of how ancient scholars handled this book proves the exact opposite. When a real historian looks at a messy ancient text, they don't see a cover-up. They see the unmistakable fingerprint of authentic preservation. Think about it logically for a second. Let's look at the anatomy of a real cover-up. If a powerful institution was truly manipulating a text to control a narrative, a scribe would have simply taken the path of least resistance. Actually, it's even simpler than that. They would have just crossed out Ezekiel's 6 lambs, written in 2 lambs to perfectly match Moses, and called it a day. Boom. Problem solved, with zero theological embarrassment. But they didn't do that. Instead, ancient scholars like Hananiah ben Hezekiah preserved the messy truth. The tradition was so incredibly intellectually honest that for certain verses, the rabbis literally just threw their hands up. They published their own confusion on the public record, declaring that the contradictions were simply too difficult for human minds to resolve, and they would just have to, quote, wait for the prophet Elijah to return in the future to explain them. Now that is profound intellectual integrity. So bringing this all back to you, we've journeyed all the way from a Babylonian liver to modern YouTube debates. And in our modern world of absolute information overload, recognizing the mechanics of how information gets weaponized like this is absolutely your best defense against manipulation. You have to protect yourself. You really must be vigilant. Whenever someone presents a stark black and white choice, you have to constantly ask yourself, what is the third option they're hiding from me? You need to look right past those emotionally charged terministic screens and demand to see the actual substance. Ask yourself if the person speaking is honestly exploring a complex truth, or if they're just setting up a slick rhetorical trap to demolish an opponent. But, we also kind of have to turn the mirror on ourselves. It's super easy to spot this stuff in a theological proxy war online, but think about your own life for a minute. Think about your last heated argument with a colleague or a partner. Have you ever cherry-picked a single line from an old text message, or maybe aggressively cited a flashy headline from a study you barely even skimmed, just to secure a victory at the dinner table? It is definitely something crucial to think about the next time you enter a debate, whether it's big or small. Are you genuinely trying to untangle the messy, complex truth of a situation? Or are you really just looking for a loophole to win? Let that question sit with you for a moment. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.